Hi everybody, Jim Hamilton with Core Resonance. This is the latest video in the videos I've been doing. This one is actually a continuation of the last video. The last video was called The Power of Thought. This one's called The Power of Thought, Refining Your Inner Dialogue. Now, what the discovery's been for me, as curious as it sounds, and of course I started out with focus. I had my 40-foot sailboat by the time I was 26. I retired when I was 30. I've kind of done it all in manner of speaking, even to the point of what I would call advanced states of consciousness, to the point where I left focus far, far, far behind as I moved into intention, and intention partnering with the cosmos, partnering with innate intelligence, and moving right on up the ladder, if you will, for which now I've got 4 books documenting what I've learned and what I've discovered. Kind of the long story short is I've kind of fallen back down a great long ways, and so I'm building my way back up. And what I'm rediscovering is focus. Now, this is curious because I haven't used focus in a very long time. I've been riding on the ethers, the currents of the ethers, and I'll leave it at that. In playing with focus, and I touched on this last week, what I discovered is that thinking isn't anywhere near as much about thinking as we think. It's really about a bit of focus that we take on, and then we receive an insight. Most people think thinking is just grinding out thoughts. And what I discovered going back to this after really years of taking a break is that when I have a thought, it starts as a piece of focus, something that I want to focus on, and I realize a thought comes to it. And so those two thoughts are my initial impetus in that thought. And then another thought comes to it, and we assume we're generating this on our own, but it's about our receptivity. It's about discernment, because as we hold focus, choice thoughts come to us. Choice thoughts are received by us. And this is what I want to differentiate and identify, that thinking, not talking about reactionary thinking. I'm not talking about arguing or different. I'm talking about thought, pure thought. It comes to us as a product of focus. I want to touch on something else real interesting, because I have 2 huge projects going on. One is Core Resonance, which I have a lot of time and a lot of attention, a lot of effort in. And there's another one, I do something else on the side, and I wouldn't call it half-baked. I would say that it's actually something I'm maybe even better suited for. I won't get into what it is. Somebody's contacted me and asked me to do something for them in this other endeavor. I seem to be naturally wired for this. And as I have put my attention to it, I've discovered that in these 2 projects, I wake up in the middle of the night downloading information on both projects at the same time. There's a break. I'll get a bunch of information on one, get a bunch of information on the other. And of course, the next morning I transcribe it. It's interesting to realize how focus works and how it draws thoughts to us. For which then, of course, we carry these thoughts out, or we learn how to partner with innate intelligence in the delivery of these thoughts. And that's how we create our realities. Now, I'd like to talk about this more, but I'm going to move on to what I want to talk about, which is the idea of our inner dialogue. So since I've rediscovered this concept about focus, and kind of going within in this kind of a simplified manner, I've come to see that our inner dialogue is what goes on. Our inner dialogue is kind of like our center. You know, of course, I say our nervous system is our center. I say our nervous system is like a living antenna system, and we receive. So the next component of receiving is our inner dialogue. Now, there's a book that I particularly like. It's called The Book of Love by Kathleen McGowan. It doesn't take place, maybe it does, some of it does take place in a dream state, or somebody who dreams, and then of course the reality happens later. They talk about coming up on this ancient site where there's a pool of water like a well, and the surface of the well is perfectly still, and they look in and they see their own reflection, and of course they end up with insight and this and that. And I want to think about your inner dialogue is kind of like this pool of water that is inside of you, which actually is a portal. Now, most of us have a great deal of racket and noise and maybe even argument going on inside our head. Most of us have not cleared away our quote-unquote inner dialogue, and that noisy quote-unquote inner dialogue kind of overwhelms the subtle nature of our being. And so as we discover focus, as we discover that focus draws to us thoughts, as we become receptive to ideas and components of ideas that we kind of build like a train of thought, if you will, we realize that this comes to us from our inner dialogue. And as we learn how to quiet our mind, this inner dialogue becomes more available. And of course, this is where you would say intuition comes from. In fact, the analogy of water is kind of interesting, because I think water and intuition have a lot in common. But as we quiet our inner nature, this inner dialogue, first off, what's quieting our inner nature? It's delving in, discovering this noisy persona that has to be let go. And by the way, the fanciest way to let go of this inner persona, this noisy persona, is of course to love it. Most of us want to push it aside, control it, manage it, be in control. But it's in the letting go, which of course we're most afraid to do, right? Maybe we'll float off the earth if we let go, if we relax like a balloon. What actually happens, and meditation is a good example, we learn how to become quiet within, we learn how to let that raucous and all the different kinds of noise and all the different kinds of voices subside over a period of time, and we train ourselves for our inner nature to become available. It's actually the most important journey there is, that inner journey and that inner dialogue, discovering it, because this introspective process is something that we have to do at some point in our lives. And as I point out occasionally, many people don't do it until the last couple of days before they die. Now, maybe that's not quite fair, because I'm sure people, as they get sick, they start thinking about a lot of things that never occurred to them before, things that are important, instead of just chasing money and these different things. And so this introspective journey is essential. Of course, meditation is a way to do it. There's lots of different classes where people can start these kinds of journeys, but ultimately it's a single person, you, going within. And as we quiet this inner nature and we discover this inner nature, this inner dialogue becomes available. Now, what I kind of want to add to this conversation is that, let me say it this way. Nature is a perfect example of order on this planet. We don't have much of a reflection for what goes on off the planet, except for, the stars are beautiful at night. There's a scale of order that, for the most part, we don't even really understand. But on this planet, we can see nature and all of its incredible diversity. And what's interesting about this world of nature is that all of it ascribes to a single order. I think you can understand and agree that even though animals eat animals and animals eat plants and plants eat animals and everybody does everything to everybody, there's an enabling and an allowing of all this, that even animals or plants that become extinct, there's an allowing, and it all just goes on. Now, what I'm trying to get to is that the humans seem to be out of sync with this order that everything else on this planet abides by, and it's why we're so dysfunctional. Curiously, this order is all around us, and but for resistance, it would be available to us. Now, this resistance, put a little asterisk by it, and you have to go back to some of my other videos, because I talk about resistance a very great deal. I'm not going to do that in this particular video. But as we learn how to go within, as we clear away the wreckage and the things that we think that we're going to find inside the trauma and the wreckage and the different things, we discover a quiet component of ourselves. And the pool of water is a good analogy. The idea of our inner dialogue is a good example. And what it really is access to God. Think of your nervous system as a living antenna system. Think of God, innate intelligence, universal mind, the cosmos, the divine, whatever you want to call it, as all around us. And think of us as receivers, as is everything in nature. And realize, but for all of our noise, all the noise going on in our mind, going on in our brain, this subtle connection would become evident. So the point of this video is that we all have an inner dialogue. We actually have two, you might say. We have the noisy one that's at the surface, the mind running on, running on, running on. And once we learn how to clear that, the subtle inner dialogue, which is about our nature, from which we get insights. Now, myself, I wake up in the middle of the night. I have a recorder handy. I transcribe my notes in the morning. What I notice is when we change states, like you jump from out of your clothes into the shower, you change state, water's moving, and also, how many people have insights in the shower? It's just an example. What I notice is that when we change states, we're between the state we were in and the next one we go to, and there's presence available for just a minute. And that's when this stuff slips in. So the whole idea is to quiet the mind. Meditation's a great idea. Of course, I do a lot of work with neurofeedback. It's a proprietary type of neurofeedback. I use neurofeedback differently than most everybody out there. Actually, let the brain train itself, clean itself up. As we quiet the brain and quiet the mind, this inner dialogue becomes available. And actually what it is innate intelligence expressing through us and out. I got a new website. It's been up just a couple of weeks. I still haven't got it all figured out. I still got things to do. I will say I do have a call on Tuesdays. I'm going to start calling it Quantum Activism, for people that want to know about not only how to find this inner dialogue and make it available to them in its purity, but how we can use this inner dialogue to make the world a better place. I think on that, I'm going to stop. Be in touch. Check out my new website. Give me the thumbs up and all those kinds of things on these videos. I wish you peace and love. Namaste.